So let me begin with an anecdote. One fine hot afternoon, I was walking down a street in my hometown in India, where I grew up. Suddenly, two young men on a bicycle came in front of me. The bicycle kept moving forward as one of them rode with the other, while the other sat backwards facing me. This continued for a good 15-20 minutes as I had nowhere else to go on a long deserted road, till I came to a street and pretended to enter one of the houses on the street, after which they both speeded away. While they followed me, or rather rode in front of me, they sang songs from latest Hindi films, songs that were meant to entice women. I was 10 years old then. On another occasion, I was going to see a friend on my motorcycle. Now I can't help but tell you this, that the only reason that my children respect me is that they know that at some point I had a motorcycle. Now in their mind, this is what I did. And you know, a high school kid, when he can tell his friends that my mom used to ride a motorcycle, this is his imagination. I haven't quite tried to correct my children's imagination, but what I had was probably this. So when I was going on my what we call scooter, suddenly another motorcycle came up close to me. Two men on the bike singing film songs rode parallel to my bike for a few minutes and then suddenly pulled their bike in front of my bike and stopped me. I was 22 then. Now my experiences, one as a 10-year-old and another as a 22-year-old, are similar. In that in both cases, the men involved thought that it was appropriate to enact some film scenes in everyday lives on the street, more so that it was acceptable to stalk, harass, bully young girls and women because it was supposedly harmless fun. These experiences are not unique in any way, and they are just a sample of many experiences I had and most women in India have. Enacting film songs on streets was and remains a normal part of India's street life. So that brings to my topic today. I want to think about two issues. How does popular culture, especially films, reflect society? And what is the role of popular culture in perpetuating misogyny, toxic masculinity, and rape culture in society? While my focus is on India and Bollywood cinema in particular, my observations may be extended to popular culture in North America, including to Hollywood films. So this is in no way exclusive to India. Patriarchy, misogyny, toxic masculinity, and female objectification are global problems. And I encourage you to think about the issues in the context of global popular culture. As I raise multiple questions today, my intention is simply to leave you with some food for thought, as there are no straightforward answers to the questions I intend to raise today. And in fact, the more I work on this paper, the more it seems that it is a much larger project than I had originally anticipated it to be. There might be a book here. Now, in the last few decades, rape culture has increasingly become a mainstream issue around the world, as sexual violence and misogyny are exacerbated by global capitalism and neoliberal economies. These shifts, combined with the postmodern era's interest in popular culture, have drawn attention to critical and academic inquiry about exemplification of sexual violence in popular culture in general. Film, in particular, as a cultural document, captures socio-cultural desires and fears around these transitions. I argue that the representation and popularization of sexual violence against women in Indian cinema is indicative of broader socio-cultural issues. And so before I come down to films, I actually want to spend some time on understanding the role of women in India and the challenges that women in India face. So let me briefly highlight the position of women in India. Firstly, one must be reminded of India's complexity. India had a female prime minister in 1966. We are still struggling with some of female political leadership in the Western countries, so this is in no way a simple, issue. And currently it has a very high number of female politicians as well as women in very high-profile positions. It has also had a strong feminist movement, and currently women's resistance movement is led on various fronts by some of the most prominent figures, such as Arundhati Roy and Kavita Krishan. Arundhati Roy, many of you may know her as a writer, and they are known globally, as well as there is much feminist movement going on at grassroots levels as well. Thus, like any other country, India struggles with women's rights issues while fostering a very active resistance movement. Yet it is also true that India is rated as one of the most dangerous countries in the world to be a woman. In a survey done by Thomson Reuters Foundation last year, that is in 2018, India was ranked as number 1 as the most dangerous country for women. Now, the survey needs to be taken with a grain of salt, as there were many problems in the methodology. And that is why it also got much backlash from women in India. But I think what it helps us to think about is that the reality that violence against women in India is very high. As per 2012 rankings, India is at the bottom of G20 nations on gender equality. Leading politicians and police officers randomly make remarks about how women are responsible for making themselves vulnerable to rape by engaging in what they consider to be anti-Indian behavior. For instance, after the Delhi rape case, and many of you may have heard of this case from 2012, in which a woman was gang raped in a bus which basically went around the town and was then thrown off the bus. Her male partner was with her, who was also brutally beaten up, and she died as a result of her injuries. And it led to huge momentum in the women's rights movement in India, where women took to streets for months. Now, after this case came out, one of the prominent Hindu priests suggested that Jyoti Singh, the woman who was assaulted and who subsequently died as a result of her injuries, could have saved herself if she had simply remembered to say her prayers to Lord Hanuman. Such victim blaming is then normalized, as women are constantly asked not to wear Western clothing, not to go out in the evenings, or not to engage in social media activity. Some rural municipalities have tried banning cell phone use by women, suggesting that women get themselves into vulnerable situations by using technology. Language of sexual assault is commonly used in day-to-day conversations and in the media, in the news channels, etc., etc. Or the fact that somebody from the fashion industry thought it appropriate to use this Delhi gang rape case as a base for advertising campaign. This photo shoot by photographer Raj Shetty was inspired by the case, and here are a few images from the photo shoot. Of course, this shows complete lack of sensitivity and the ease with which rape culture is proliferated. In one of the latest developments in the country stemming from the misuse of technology, video recordings of gang rapes are sold openly. A recent BBC News series titled Shame, focusing on global cultures of shaming women, covered the rise of gang rapes in India. One of the cases discussed is that of a 40-year-old woman from northern India who killed herself after a video of her being raped was circulated on WhatsApp. In August 2016, the Times of India, India's leading daily newspaper, found that hundreds, perhaps thousands of video clips of sexual assault were being sold every day in shops across Uttar Pradesh, one of the provinces in northern India. One shopkeeper in Agra told the newspaper, "Porn is passe. These real-life crimes are the rage." Such rape culture reflects the overall marginalization of women in India, which manifests itself in various issues, including female feticide and infanticide, as well as dowry deaths. According to a UNICEF report, female sex determination and sex-selective abortion by unethical medical professionals has today grown into a 1,000 crore rupee industry, which roughly translates into $250 million industry of sex determination and sex-selective abortions. Given that many female fetuses are aborted and many girls die under the age of 5, the male-female ratio is quite imbalanced in India. In a 2011 study, British medical journal Lancet found that up to 12 million Indian female fetuses had been aborted in the previous 3 decades. As per the 2011 census, the national sex ratio was approximately 930 women to 1,000 men, with some provinces reporting 850 women to 1,000 men. In 2015, the United Nations said that the dwindling number of Indian girls had reached emergency proportions and was contributing to crimes against women. Now, one of the ways of looking at the issue is to understand it in the context of neoliberal economy. Kavita Krishnan, Secretary of All India Progressive Women's Association, a Marxist-Leninist feminist, argues that tradition and culture are invoked to create a fictitious unity of men across classes. Men across class and caste divide, again, caste matters a lot within the Indian socio-political system. So men across class and caste divide unite to control their sisters and daughters. And she argues that misogynistic culture is shaped by modern anxieties and economic, social, and political motives, and that rape is a way of disciplining women's labor in a neoliberal capitalist economy. Clearly, when girls are considered an economic liability, they are not wanted. Women become commodities in such neoliberal economies, and if they are commodities, their bodies become sites of consumption and entertainment on one hand, and of shaming and disciplining on the other. And such shaming and disciplining is shown regularly in Indian cinema. Now, I use the term Bollywood here to refer to Hindi language film industry. The industry operates from Bombay, which is now known as Mumbai, and thus the industry has been known as Bollywood. Cinema in general, but Bollywood in particular, has an extremely wide reach, and it has an impact on socio-cultural lives of people both in India and in diaspora. So at this point, let me just briefly provide some overview of Indian cinema and explain the place of Bollywood cinema in the global entertainment industry. India produces the largest number of films, the highest number of films in the world. There are more than 2,000 multiplexes with more than 11,000 screens throughout the country. More than 3 billion tickets are sold annually, and more than 1,900 films, as per UNESCO's count from 2015, more than 1,900 films were produced in 2015. So you can simply imagine the reach of these films. Now, Bollywood, which is the one part of Indian cinema. So Indian cinema encompasses regional cinema, which is a number of languages, as well as independent films, non-commercial films. Of that, Bollywood is one part, and Bollywood produces approximately 200 to 300 films a year, and it has a vast viewership both in India and globally, and it has the largest market share in Indian cinema. Films and film stars from Bollywood, as well as other industries within India, have a huge following. At times, temples are built in honor of film stars, leading to literal worshipping of these stars. So Bollywood films have a tremendous impact in shaping and maintaining socio-cultural values. The films increasingly depict misogyny, women as suppressed and submissive, and independent women as wanton and out of norm. Although more and more films are being produced where a different set of women is now being portrayed, by and large, the portrayal of women in these films remains stereotypical. And the new portrayal, which usually focuses on, say, sexually liberated women, caters to the urban populations in India or Indians in diaspora, but does not represent the reality of women in rural India, where 70% of India's population, in fact, lives in rural India. So now I want to focus briefly on some ways in which women are objectified in these films. But before we get there, some clarification on the term objectification. That reminds me that I was actually to give you So here I'm going to look at Martha Nussbaum, known philosopher and professor of ethics and law. She argues that in all the cases of objectification, what is at issue is a question of treating one thing as another. One is treating as an object what is really not an object. That is, what is in fact a human being. Nussbaum suggests that at least following 7 notions are involved in that idea, and given the lack of time, I'm not going to go through this, but you have the information there in the handout. So these are 7 ways in which objectification can be identified. And we can see all of this when we really get down to nitty-gritty analysis of some of these films. Nussbaum reminds us that feminist thought has typically represented men's sexual objectification of women as not a trivial but a central problem in women's lives, and the opposition to it as at the very heart of feminist politics. So if you look at objectification in Bollywood, some research has been done, although there is need for detailed research. Whatever is available is nearly 2 decades old. In one research done by Das Gupta in 1996 and Dern in 1999, it was found that 56% of Hindi films depicted sexual assault and harassment of women, which includes violence in 40% of sexual scenes. In another research based on content analysis of films produced between 2000 and 2012, Manohar and Klein used social cognitive theory and script theory to argue that Hindi film narratives of assault have the potential to influence sexual socialization of young Indian audiences. Sexual assault portrayals in Hindi films may reflect culturally embedded beliefs about sexual violence as well as present alternative beliefs in each phase of media assault script. In yet another analysis, Ramasubramaniam and Oliver found that, I quote, severe violence was depicted as criminal or serious, but moderate sexual violence was depicted as fun, enjoyable, and a normal expression of romantic relationships. In general, there is agreement among scholars as well as activists that Bollywood plays a role in upholding toxic masculinity, as male characters are shown as aggressive, authoritarian, and violent, while women are presented as submissive, oppressed, sexually objectified, and as victims. Now, some art and independent films are challenging these trends, but popular cinema at large continues to proliferate rape culture in a myriad of ways. So let's look at how Bollywood films add to this objectification. What is the social narrative of rape presented here? Films screen male aggression and violence in a number of ways, and some of these are, and then I'll be breaking this down, and this is where we start looking at some of the scenes and songs. So unwanted gaze and touch, eve-teasing, I'll explain the term in a minute, catcalls, stalking, erotic dance numbers, songs with double entendre, hypermasculinity reflected through male gaze, representations of virginity and chastity, and heteronormativity. So since the 1970s, Bollywood films have shown action films with a strong, macho, heteronormative, hypermasculine male character as an aggressor and savior of women. I can talk about umpteen number of examples of male aggression, but I'll show clip from one popular song from the 1980s, which, while shown as a fun song of a hero pursuing a girl, is in fact a scene of coercion. So just to give you some background before we watch the video, some of these do not have subtitles. So in this one we have Amitabh Bachchan as the lead character, and Bachchan was the superstar of the 1970s. And he still holds considerable fame in the country. He was known as an angry young man in his times. In this particular scene, or the song, which has been one of the very popular songs even today, some 40 years later. And in this song, he is asking the woman who he is trying to woo to give him a kiss. And he says that last Friday you had told me that you would give me a kiss. This Friday, and it's Friday now, and now you are refusing to give me a kiss, and you need to give me a kiss. And he's aided by a large group of men who are coercing the woman to give a kiss. During the song, she says she had said that she will kiss him, but she changed her mind, and then she does not want to kiss him. What I want you to look at is the crowd, the aggression, and the way the woman is being bullied. It's a long song, so we probably will watch first 2 minutes and last minute. Throughout the song, which runs into 7 minutes, basically see, so Jumma is Friday, Jumma is kiss. And so throughout the song, the refrain is, today is Friday, you had promised and you need to kiss me, and she keeps saying, no kiss, like Jumma nade is, I'm not going to kiss you. And then it ends with basically he extracting a kiss out of her. So the other, so this was, the first point was hypermasculinity. Now to look at what has been identified as heroines who are, as actors who are known as item roles, who perform what is called item songs. Item songs are hypermasculinized off-plot songs in a very catchy overview. It's a brand name in India, and so the song is, I'm going to glue the photograph of you on my chest. But as the lyrics move forward, you hear basically the woman saying, asking basically in a way to be raped, to be consumed, to be, as she is a tandoori chicken, and he can basically consume her in an alcoholic state. This song is also set in red light district, and the female dancers are all sex workers. The hero, played here by Salman Khan, visits the district with his friends and is supposedly being enticed by one of the sex workers, played here by Kareena Kapoor. Both Khan and Kapoor are some of the top-rated Bollywood actors. And the next one here is also an item song. Again, I have given you parts of lyrics in there as well. Here, I just want you to see the way the woman is presented. She's flying up, and there are like thousands of men standing there. And again, as you read the lyrics, you can see that the song is very much meant as a sexual enticement song, where she is basically saying she has seen the world. You get the idea, based on these two songs, what item songs are, and what the industry is doing is, these are basically, they have no connection at times to the plot, most of the times. And they hire these actors who are simply hired to do that one particular song in the film, and this song is released months before the film is released, so that it catches the market, and right, so people are already humming the song. It's playing on the streets, it's playing at all the shops, and then the film is released, so it ensures in a way the success of the film as well. So the next point here in terms of the way films promote objectification is eve-teasing. Now this may be somewhat of a new term to people in the West. It's an Indian euphemism used for sexual harassment, typically harassment on the streets. And Hindi films show such harassment as fun. And that's what I was pointing to as I began my talk with those two examples that I gave you. It's a, it's a medium to getting closer to the female love and by the male protagonist, and typically it signals that a girl's no is actually a yes. If you convince her enough, then she's going to say yes. So she just basically needs to be convinced of it. Such convincing happens in the form of stalking, singing songs around her, offering her unwanted gifts, staring at her, all considered mild aggressors. And so the constant ear-teasing invariably leads to then finally the girl falling in love and eventually marrying the aggressor. Now this is again a scene from one of the films. Now in this case, the female lead does not fall in love. In a minute, we'll get there in a minute. But we see strong emphasis on the hero basically pursuing the heroine. The other point to think about is emphasis on virginity. Virginity and chastity in Bollywood cinema are represented as religious and moral issues. Female virginity remains a very important Indian value, a cornerstone of popular culture, both reflected and perpetuated by the film industry. The cinematic representation of women and popular imagination are thus overshadowed by these roles of an ideal virginal woman, devoted wife and sacrificial mother, who is not only chaste and pure, but advocates social values rooted in patriarchy and maintains family honor. So the scene that I'm going to show you is from this film, Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, which was one of the huge blockbuster films of 1990s, and especially it is considered as the first diaspora film because it had a huge success in the diaspora. And in this scene, the protagonist, the male and the female, they had been out, she had been drinking and she had had a bit much, and so next morning she wakes up in the male protagonist's bed and she wonders what happened the night before. And he teases her, he basically insinuates that they had sex, that he even shows her lipstick marks on his chest. She cries and is very upset, and at the end of the scene, when she's hysterical, that's when the male protagonist tells her that I know what honor means for the Indian woman, and that not even in my dream would I do such a thing to you. So of course, on one hand, there is the emphasis on virginity. On the other hand, there is the emphasis on the good side of this good Indian boy who can pull a prank on her, suggesting that she had lost her virginity, and then reminding her that he is aware that it is so important to her. Now looking at time, because we want to leave some time for questions, so I'm going to quickly wrap up the last 2 or 3 points. I mean, I had planned one more video, but I think we're going to drop that. So the other 2 points that I wanted to bring up is the representation of good versus bad women. And good women are Indian women, virginal, sacrificial, and the bad women are, westernized women who have forgotten their Indian values. So in this film, there is this woman in London. She's an Indian woman, but she wears Western clothing, dyes her hair, and she was basically rescued by this Indian man, and who reminded her of her Indian values. And the last point that I wanted to bring up is the proliferation of rape myths. And all these films, they continue to perpetuate rape myths, mostly showing women fighting back aggressively, leaving bodily scars, torn clothes, disheveled hair, blood on face and body. Basically, she's an ideal victim who did fight back. On the other hand, majority of the survivors are also shown as either killing the perpetrator or committing suicide or living a very lonely life. Basically, once she has lost her honor, her position in society is automatically lost. In some films, the survivor marries the rapist, or a good Samaritan marries her. Thus, the normal life, quote unquote, of these women is still within the confines of institution of marriage. So the scene I was going to show you was one of those rape myth scenes from this film. It is available on YouTube, so I'll leave that with you. To basically come to the end here, all this is not meant to say that the film industry is directly responsible for the rising number of rapes and other crimes. However, it plays a role in objectification of women and in shaping the views of society. Especially, it aids acceptance of rape myths and creation of an image of an ideal victim. If one were to look at the portrayals from, and I have not gone too far in my study yet, social cognitive theory or from cultivation theory, it is clear that mass media and popular culture affects people's perceptions of society. Also, there is some research to show this connection in the context of Indian cinema. So, for example, a study by UNICEF, I think it is from 2015, it focuses on the influence of film in India, and it shows that teenage boys' understanding of masculinity was influenced by cinema. Similarly, in another study, it has been argued that the repeated glamorization of eve-teasing in films as a macho manifestation of a tough-acting college student hero who initially upsets the heroine but finally wins her has fostered a climate supportive of such acts in real life. Some research conducted through both content analysis of films as well as interviews with consumers of these films has also concluded that young men's understanding of women's sexual relationship and marriage and romance is heavily influenced by films. Dr. Ranjana Kumari, who is the director of Center for Social Research, argues that films add to the culture of sexualizing women. So I want to conclude by saying that India's film industry is slowly waking up to the call for change. So some recent films, for example, films such as Pink or Talwar, have focused on issues of sexual violence in a progressive way, where they are not assigning the blame on female survivors or further perpetuating rape myths. So films do have potential for positive social change, but the industry, which is part of capitalist market-driven structures, has long ways to go in using cinema as a tool for social advocacy.